Welcome to the Soul Connection podcast. I'm Delaney Metcalf, intern at Good Faith Media and Master Divinity student at Campbell University Divinity School. I've completed 1 unit of clinical pastoral education, beginning the process of entering chaplaincy. Soul Connection is a 3 episodes, limited series podcast, raising awareness in chaplaincy and exploring the ministry of chaplains. This is a project through Good Faith Media, asking questions on what chaplaincy is, what chaplains exactly do, and why we need chaplaincy. We invite you to listen to conversations with experienced chaplains who share their wisdom and understanding. Let's join Reverend Renée Owen, who's on the governing board for Good Faith Media. She is the director and endorser of Chaplaincy and Pastoral Counseling Ministries for a Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. Renée has over 20 years of chaplaincy in healthcare and working for the administration operation roles in chaplaincy. Also served as the executive director of a large hospital in the Atlanta area. We will join her today talking about different types of chaplaincy and dive into her own experience. Hi Renée, welcome to Soul Connection.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Delaney.
Can you explain different types of chaplaincy, such as in the medical setting or military?
Absolutely. One of the things I love about chaplaincy is that it gives chaplains the opportunity to work in specialized settings. And some of those specialized settings, the biggest, I guess, specialized settings are medical settings and the military. As a chaplain, any specialized setting that you work in, you will have specific skills. And I feel like those skills will translate to most any setting that you're working in. I think the biggest difference in serving as a chaplain in a medical setting, in a healthcare setting, or in the military are perhaps the long-term relationships that you develop with people. In the military, a chaplain really is serving as a pastor to the military, the service personnel, and their families. You have the opportunity to establish longer term relationships with individuals. Military chaplains work in the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army. And in reserve capacities, active duty capacities, and in the National Guard. And even in those reserve capacities and in National Guard settings where you are not full-time per se, you establish relationships with individuals that last for a very long time. In the healthcare setting, you can have long-term relationships with patients and their families if there are patients who have chronic illnesses or patients who have diagnoses that require them to come back to the hospital often. A lot of times, the relationships that you develop in a healthcare setting as a chaplain are going to be very short-term. And if you work in a setting such as a trauma center, or you're doing work in an intensive care unit at a hospital, those relationships could be span over the course of just a few hours. If you're working with a family or an individual has experienced a traumatic event that requires a patient to be in the hospital longer, then you will develop that longer term relationship. Otherwise, if you're working in a trauma center and you're working with a family who has experienced a loss, or even in a medical surgical unit, and it's a family that you haven't met before and you're going in to be with them during a time of crisis, you have to establish a relationship with that patient or with that family. A lot of times, if it's a crisis, very quickly, and then you may be with them for an hour or two, and then you may never hear from that family again. And trusting that the work that you've done and the relationship that you've established with them is something that has made a difference, is something that I think you learn to carry with you. There may be times in the military that those relationships are quick, but most often those are going to be long-term relationships. And the advantage of that is when there is a crisis, with a service person or their family, you have that relationship established and can support that military service personnel and or family in a manner that you may not have been able to do otherwise.
If someone is within these settings, how could they go about getting the service of a chaplain?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Because if you don't know how to get in touch with the chaplain, then you can't benefit from their ministry, from their services, and from their presence. In a healthcare setting, in a medical setting, most often you rely on the staff, the healthcare staff, the team, the interdisciplinary team, which would include the doctors, the nurses, social workers, nurse aides. When I served in the hospital, a lot of times, sometimes my best resources were the housekeepers, the environmental service staff. In a healthcare setting, you really most often will rely on somebody else on the care team to call you, to make you aware that there is a family or a patient that would benefit from the chaplain's presence and the chaplain's ministry. Different hospitals will handle that differently. When I first started in chaplaincy almost 25 years ago, when I was doing my training, we had pagers that we carried. I'm showing my age now. We had pagers that we carried, and we would get a page, and we would find a phone in the hospital, and we would return the page and find out what was going on. Now that, of course, that is much more advanced, where you can receive text messages, or the last hospital that I served in, we carried our cell phones and had those where we were contacted. In the hospital, one of the best ways also to get in touch with a chaplain or to identify needs of a patient or a family is a chaplain rounding through a clinical area. Most chaplains in healthcare settings will be assigned a particular clinical area. If not, a lot of times there may be a chaplain that's covering the whole house, as we say, that's covering the entire hospital. And then making rounds. You just make rounds. You walk through the intensive care unit. You check in with nurses. How are you doing today? Do you have a family or a patient that you think would benefit from a chaplain visit today? I remember in some hospitals where I served in medical surgical units, we may even go door to door just to give a friendly hello or check on people. And so then you make the patients and the families aware that you're there. And it becomes an opportunity to educate patients and families and staff about who you are and what you do as a chaplain. There are opportunities where patients and families can call the chaplain directly, and usually that information would be posted in a patient's room or in a family waiting room. And again, depending on the healthcare system or the particular hospital, that may vary from calling the operator to have the operator call the chaplain, or sometimes calling the chaplain directly via whatever cell phone or texting service that they have internally in the hospital. In the military, it's a little different. Military chaplains also have coverage that would be 24/7, the way that they do in the hospital, where you would have a chaplain who would be available for emergencies after hours, which would typically be evenings and overnights and weekends. But the military, the chaplains would make themselves available by sort of the same concept of rounding, but really being able to go throughout the base, throughout the area where they're serving, and get to know the soldiers or the airmen or the sailors, and establishing a relationship with them to, again, educate them who they are and what they do as a chaplain. And sometimes that might mean going out into the field, as they call it, to be directly with the soldier or the airmen or airwomen and with the sailors, to be involved with the things that they're doing on a regular basis. And again, it becomes that opportunity where you are having just a conversation with them and establishing a relationship and letting them know that you're available. And in the military, most of the time it will be where the service person or the family is going to reach out directly to the chaplain, and that information would be published or presented somewhere where they know how to call the chaplain directly. In the military, also, commanders will reach out to chaplains if they become aware of a need of a particular service person or their family. And so again, it's sort of the idea of the team that's caring for the people that you're serving, having a relationship with those people so that they can also make you aware of needs or a crisis in the event that it happens.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about corporation chaplains or Christian universities that will have chaplains.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a fantastic question. So in addition to chaplains serving in healthcare settings, in the military, as you said, there are often times that you'll have chaplains in educational settings, especially in settings that are colleges or universities or even schools that are faith-based schools, faith-based campuses. Even for some universities that are not faith-based campuses, there are chaplains that will be serving. And a lot of times those chaplains are going to be of a particular, they'll be on campus to serve a particular faith group, and they would always be trained and open to being present for students of any faith. And that's one of the things that I love about chaplaincy. It's just that as a chaplain, we're called to be present for all people. In colleges and universities, being present for students who are going through life changes, who might be going through a crisis, somebody who just needs to talk. You're away from home. Students are away from home, sometimes for the first time. So having a chaplain, someone who can listen, someone who can reflect back with them, help them explore in a safe space is so valuable. Chaplains who serve in businesses and industries serve as sort of in the role of a kind of a pastor that's there in the business or the industry, and they're there to serve people of all faiths. So chaplains are grounded in their own particular faith, and they're there to serve everyone. They're there to serve people of many different faiths. And the language that we use and the language that the military uses a lot is chaplains serve in pluralistic environments. Getting back to chaplains who serve in businesses and industries, they have that opportunity to establish those longer term relationships with employees of those businesses and industries, and work very similar to chaplains in a military setting. They will have the opportunity to be present with employees, a lot of times get to know their families. They also have the opportunity to support them and get to know them better. And if they identify needs that they can't meet as a chaplain, then they may very well and hopefully will refer those employees and families to resources in the community. And any chaplain really who's serving in any specialized setting, there are, one of the things that I've always been aware of as a chaplain is staying within my lane, making sure that I'm not trying to be a social worker. I'm not trying to establish a therapeutic relationship with the individual or the group of people that I'm with, because I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed counselor. And so being aware of that as a chaplain is so important, because you want to stay in your lane and then be able to refer people out into the community for resources that might be helpful to them.
CBF, Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, partners and endorses chaplains. Can you tell a little bit more about CBF and the process of this happening?
Absolutely. I'm glad that you asked. Endorsement means that we provide part of their credentialing that's needed in order for them to get a job as a chaplain or to serve as a chaplain. We do have some chaplains who serve in volunteer positions, and those volunteer positions also require endorsement. Sometimes you'll hear the language ecclesiastical endorsement. So there are many different faith groups who provide ecclesiastical endorsement. And what that means is that ecclesiastical endorsement certifies that a minister, a clergy person, is in good standing with their particular religious body, their faith group, and that clergy person or that minister who is serving as a chaplain is appointed on its behalf. So our chaplains and pastoral counselors that we endorse, we certify that they are in good standing with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship. We certify that they've met particular requirements in order to be endorsed with CBF. And then we are certifying and blessing them to a ministry in a particular specialized setting and vetting that they are serving, appointing them on our behalf.
Do you have any final remarks before we close out today?
Delaney, I appreciate so much the opportunity to talk with you, to get to know you better, and to just have the opportunity to promote chaplaincy alongside of you. Our goal is to educate people, and for people who want to become a chaplain, we want to make it easier for people to understand the pathway to become a chaplain. We don't want to compromise any of the credentialing or any of the things that you have to do to become a chaplain. We want to make it easier so that if you want to become a chaplain, you know, these are the things I need to do. About a year ago, I had a lady reach out to me, and she has worked in healthcare for years, and she's going back to school to go to seminary, and she wants to become a chaplain. And she said, Renee, I Googled on the internet, how do I become a chaplain? And I got about 100 different responses. So, part of it is there's sort of this mystery around it that we want to dispel so that we can help people through that discernment and calling process. Because if you're called to be a chaplain, then we want to help you along the way. And that's one of the things that I love about this role as endorser for the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, is not only helping people move through the process of endorsement and then supporting them personally and professionally when they become endorsed, helping through conversations of discernment. So even if you aren't the right fit to be endorsed with CBF, then I want to help you find, where your fit is. I want to be a part of just your conversation and be a conversation partner with you to help you learn about chaplaincy. I absolutely love being a chaplain. I really see my role as an endorser now as a chaplain to the chaplains. And being a chaplain, we have such an incredible opportunity to be with people in such sacred moments. We're invited in oftentimes with people who have no idea who we are. They just know we're a chaplain and they trust us. And that's a lot of trust to put into somebody. And so that's an honor. It's an honor when we have the opportunity to journey with people through such sacred times in their lives. And I can't imagine having done anything else in my career. And I am so honored to have the opportunity to support chaplains now and to support people to become a chaplain. And I've had so many people who have guided me and supported me over my journey that I want to continue to be able to do that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you for joining us today on Soul Connection, a 3-episodes limited series podcast from Good Faith Media, raising awareness in chaplaincy and exploring the ministry of chaplains. I'm Delaney Metcalf.